Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth Grice. I'm the Supported Journey Manager at Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. Thank you ever so much for joining us this afternoon for what should be a really interesting half hour on the importance of making a will. There are a few of us joining now. I'm just going to leave it one more minute just in case we get some more participants. I know it's a big ask. These last few days of the summer sunshine, just feel like you want to make the most of it. So bringing everyone inside for a Zoom meeting, I do appreciate. Yeah, might not be at the top of the list today, but it will be worth your while. Okay. So I will introduce you to our speaker for today in the next few minutes. We're very lucky to be joined by Claudine Jackson today from Trent Wills and Estates. But before I do that, I just wanted to very quickly run through why gifts that are included in people's wills are so important to Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. They truly are gifts that last for generations to come, and they allow other people to enjoy Nottinghamshire's wildlife and wild places in the future, just like that we all do here today. So they provide a wilder future for the people, places and wildlife of Nottinghamshire. I think the really important thing to stress is that a gift included in somebody's will, no matter the size, will allow your passion for wildlife to live on and ensure that those following in our footsteps can experience the wildlife that Nottinghamshire calls home. In recent years, gifts made to the Wildlife Trust in our supporters' wills have had a huge impact on wildlife. They've helped us look after many of our 40+ nature reserves across the county. They've helped us stand up for species that are under threat. And they've helped us inspire thousands of children with the wonders of nature. So every single gift we receive is hugely important. It makes a vital contribution to our work, no matter the size. And thank you today for joining us and for thinking about including a gift in your will. Without further ado, I shall hand you over to Claudine, who's going to take us through those steps of how to include a gift in your will. Over to you, Claudine.
Well, thank you very much, Ruth, for that introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm Claudine Jackson from Trent Wills and Estates. It's lovely to be here this afternoon, and thank you for your time today. I'm going to take you through a webinar, 5 ways to protect your family, and that's really what I'm here to be able to do, to just answer some of the questions that people have about making a will, keeping themselves up to date, and doing the things that will help them protect their family. I'm going to share my screen with you. So do bear with me 1 second as I share my screen. This worked earlier in the practice session, so fingers crossed. Are we okay, Ruth? Can you see my screen? Yeah, excellent. Got a thumbs up. Right. So as I say, my name is Claudine Jackson. My company is Trent Wills and Estates, and I'm based in West Bridgford in Nottingham. I have recently become a partner of Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. They're my chosen charity. Why? Because I love going to skylarks on practically a daily basis. So I'm very, lucky to live nearby there, and I truly appreciate the joy that brings me and other people just to enjoy their natural surroundings. And so I want to do what I can to try and help support the work of the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust by being a charity partner. So about me, I am a will writer. I'm also a qualified trust and estates practitioner, part of STEP, which is the leading body for wills and trust planning. So just to kind of say what we're covering today, it really is a whistle-stop tour. We're going to be covering making a will, keeping your will up to date. We're going to look at financial planning and some of the things that you might need to consider about impact of bereavement on death, talking about funerals and lasting power of attorney. And one of the things about this webinar is that, it's really easy to put off making plans for your family and avoid talking about what happens if there is an illness or an accident or death. And it might be that you've just not got around to sort of making or updating your, your wills or your powers of attorney, or it might have some questions that are holding you back. Or equally, you might be thinking about other people that you know and care for, and thinking about the actions that they may need to take, and so want to find out a bit more. I mean, whatever your reasons are for attending this webinar, and whatever your stage of life, I'm hoping that this will be a helpful introduction to you and to help you protect the loved ones you love. So why is this all important? Well, number one, I always ask people, what is it that they want to achieve when they're making their wills and taking out powers of attorney and funeral plans. And for many people, it's along the lines of that they want to make it easier for their family, to make sure their children are protected, that they don't want there to be any fallings out. And the things that can generally start, triggering people to take action are things like having children, being in a relationship, whether you're married or unmarried, owning a home or other property. You might be doing a financial planning exercise, such as having a pension review or a mortgage appointment, and you're advised by the advisor to make sure that you have an up-to-date will. Of course, significant birthdays and getting older is often a trigger to thinking about what you need to do to take action. And of course, experiencing bereavement or health changes can obviously focus the mind on what you need to do. I think overall, over the many families that I've helped over the years, the one thing that people want is peace of mind and do the right thing by others. So let's talk about this first thing about preparing to make a will. Now, I'm going to hope that you're going to speak to a professional will writer, somebody like myself who's qualified to help you. The things that I will always ask you is I'd need to find out about your family, your finances, what your wishes are and what your concerns are, because that's going to help me understand what sorts of options we need to discuss. And there are some things that I would always say to you. If you've not made a will before, people will say, well, what do I need to prepare? Well, the starting point would be to have a think about who it is you want to include in your will as beneficiaries, executors and guardians, and we're going to come to that in a moment about the different terms of that. But you want to be thinking of having the names and addresses of the people that you want to include in your will to hand. Next is to kind of have an approximate list of your assets and liabilities. So assets being values of property, looking at life insurance policies you have, savings and investments. An approximate figure is very helpful, so we can understand what the value of your estate is. Liabilities such as any sort of loans, debts, mortgages is also important for me to know. All of this is good for me to understand how you own property, what you own, and also the value of your estate for inheritance tax purposes, because if there are issues, then we can start looking at taking action perhaps to reduce that if that's appropriate for you. As one of the other parts of having a will is about having some specific gifts in your will, and you can say where your personal items, your personal possessions go to. So that could be anything from your record collection to your prized guitar or antique vase, whoever it is that you want to have receive something of importance to you, if you have items that are important. The other thing that you can do is have specify that sums of money goes to individuals, maybe it's friends, nieces or nephews, or charity. And of course, Ruth's spoken about how important gifts to charities in wills are to the Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, and that's obviously applicable to other charities too. And one thing that people, can do is they could give a sum of money. You could specify £500, £1,000 in your will and you can give that to a charity, a named charity, or you could leave a percentage of your estate. And you could leave 5%, 10%, whatever percentage you feel is appropriate, and you can give those charity events, the charity gifts, to multiple charities or just a single one. And you can be sure that the charity will appreciate that gift, so that it can give that continued support after you've gone, for everybody else to benefit from. I will always double check the wording of the gift to make sure that it fits with the needs of the charity. But it's absolutely makes my heart sing when people leave gifts in their wills to charities. It's such a fantastic thing to do, and if you're able to make a gift in your will to a charity, that really will be treasured. The other side is that obviously you may want to have beneficiaries of your estate, so that's family members, spouses, nieces, nephews, friends, whoever it wants to be. You can leave, you can say what percentage of your estate or fraction of your estate you would want them to inherit. I would also, I'm just going to come back to what the definitions are about beneficiaries and executors, and just explain those key terms. So executors, they are responsible for administering your estate, and they have legal responsibility for making sure that they are understanding the terms of your will and correctly completing the grant of probate paperwork, or appointing other people like myself to do that for them. But they're responsible for making sure your wishes are done and that the correct procedures are followed and right amounts of taxes are paid if necessary. Guardians, if you are making a will and you have children under 18, the most important thing that you should be thinking about is who your choice of guardians are. And you want to be thinking about the age and health and suitability of the person that you're appointing. Ideally, the guardian should be based in the UK, and you can appoint a single person, or you could appoint a married or cohabitating couple. It's not a good idea at all to appoint your brother in Leicester and your sister in Cornwall to act as joint guardians, because if it makes a lot of problems if there is disagreement over shared parental responsibilities, which is what the guardianship is. Beneficiaries, now they're the lucky ones, they're the ones who inherit, and of course, your beneficiaries can be anywhere in the world, but it's obviously very important that we have a way of tracing them. So if you do have beneficiaries, it's a good idea to keep, to have an up-to-date address for them. And I would like to just say about, obviously within your will, obviously families come in different shapes and sizes, and a one-size-fits-all approach is not always the best thing to do. So considering what people want to achieve, and if there are circumstances where people have concerns about beneficiaries, they might be vulnerable due to their age or their lifestyle, so alcohol, gambling addictions, other sorts of things, or if there's disabilities, which mean that actually the beneficiary shouldn't inherit directly, or perhaps you're worried about a spouse remarrying in the future and inheritance getting diverted off into different directions, or costs of debts or other sorts of things eating up at the inheritance, then you can use trusts. Your will can include trusts to protect your beneficiaries and your legacy for the future. So that's something that I would look at through a will appointment. Next is keeping your will up to date. Now, it's very important to make a will, but the one thing you definitely need to do is make sure it's up to date. And I'd suggest that you review that every 3, at a maximum of 5 years, to make sure it's up to date. Your life doesn't stand still, and neither should your will. If there's been any changes since making it, about any births, deaths, marriages, divorces, separation, or if you're now sort of living with a partner and you're not married, or there's any issues over property ownership or financial changes, it's a good idea to update your will and just make sure it's suitable and it's going to cover the people that need to be covered. There's lots of and also things like changes of wishes. It's whatever's written down last is your last will and testament. That's what's going to take effect. So if you've changed your mind over who inherits, or you've changed your mind about the suitability of executors, trustees, or guardians, then it's really important that you update your will. And of course, the big thing is finding your will. So you've gone to all the effort of making your will. It's really important that those who are named as executors are able to find a copy of your original will and that it's kept in good condition. If it's stuffed in a kitchen drawer or hidden away in an obscure place, it's going to make it very difficult for people to know where it is. So now I do recommend that people, take advantage of storage options, which means that their wills will be safely, and securely looked after, and will be found at the point of death. But it's obviously very important that your executors know where your will is. The next part is really to talk about financial planning and the impact really of death. And it's really important that you don't underestimate the impact and costs of bereavement or incapacity, because in a time of need, most people don't want to be worrying about whether you can pay the bills or keep the roof over your head or pay for a funeral. It can be incredibly stressful to be thinking of, having all these worries at a time of grief. So the best thing you can do is to, plan ahead and put measures in place to ensure that these events can be paid for. So one of the options is, of course, having some life insurance. And again, I would recommend that, if you haven't got any life insurance or you're wanting to get life insurance, please do make sure that you go to a professional broker so that they can at least understand to make sure that the policy will cover you. Because if you have any underlying health conditions or any other sorts of things, you'll need to make sure that the policy will actually pay out, that you're not left in a kind of a loophole on that. The other thing is to critical illness. Obviously, that can be annexed onto a life insurance policy or perhaps taken out separately, but thinking about any incapacity, such as so that you have money if you get diagnosed with cancer or some other very serious illness, that there'll be money to be able to continue to pay the mortgage or any other things that you have needs for. If you're employed, depending on perhaps the size of your employer, you may be able to have something called death in service benefit. If you do have a death in service benefit, then often this is a multiple of your salary, and you should check that you've nominated that. It's really important. If you've got it, you should check that there is a nomination in place for who should receive that death in service benefit, because again, that can be very valuable, and it also means that the people that need it will, should get it much quicker, and then it doesn't get tied up in the estate for things like probate or other sorts of things. So you really do need to make sure that if you've got death in service benefit or pensions, that you've also nominated those. So private or workplace pensions, make sure you've got your nominations in place. And the key thing is that the earlier that you take action, like anything, to plan ahead or perhaps seek financial advice about retirement, you can really get in some benefit from taking financial advice earlier in your life, because you can then make sure that you're going to maximize things like your tax allowances, your retirement planning, so that there's more for you and your loved ones. Obviously we can look at inheritance tax planning as well if that is an issue for you. But to illustrate to you the cost of bereavement on death, I'm going to just explain to you that there is something called the cost of dying report, which, believe it or not, is a national annual survey of bereaved families and funeral directors. So it's produced every year, and it takes into account what the costs are of funerals. So of death. So the total figure being £9,204 as the average cost of dying. So that's not that's just an average. That's not the sort of maximum ceiling. You can see a big chunk of that being over £4,000 just on the average basic cost of a funeral, and legal fees and other sorts of costs in association with the funeral are quite significant. So Where people haven't made any plans to pay for these, the funeral is clearly the thing that needs to be paid for first thing, then it can cause an enormous strain on the family. So it's just something to bear in mind. And of course, the thing that you can do to try and alleviate some of these costs is to consider making a funeral plan. I can obviously talk to you about that if that's something that you would like some advice on. I'll just talk about prepaid funeral plans. Is that I mean, obviously there are a number of different options. One of the things are that it combats against the rising costs that there are, which they go significantly above inflation. The cost of funerals are rising every single year and have done for the last over 10 years. That's not going to change. But one of the other things is about making obviously making sure you've got enough money to pay for funerals in the future, is that making sure that your family know what you want is really, really important. Because apart from the cost, it's the emotional strain and impact of organising funerals when people don't know what their loved ones would want. So you can help your family by saying what you would want. Maybe you have a preferred colour. Maybe you'd like a special song or hymn to be played, or a reading, or you know where you might want your ashes to be scattered, or where you might want to be buried. And all of those things, those personal preferences, can make a really big difference to your family members who are trying to make sure that they're giving you the right farewell, and at a time when of enormous personal strain. Obviously, if you're not sure what you want, but you actually know what you really don't want, that's also really helpful. So if you don't know what colour you would like everybody to wear, or you don't have a favourite song, but you know, actually, I don't want people to wear black, or I don't want a religious funeral, and then say that. That's at least a starting point for that. And of course, having a plan to pay for your funeral is really important, because you're not going to be able to wait for a sale of house or money tied up in investments to be encashed in order to pay for funerals. Because there are benefits of having a funeral plan held in advance. The main one being that it's secure, and it pays for the funeral, guaranteeing their services despite the sort of rising costs in the future. If you go for, obviously making sure that you go for a reputable plan provider. The next bit is I want to talk to you about lasting power of attorney, because this is just as important as making a will. Unlike a will, a lasting power, which a will comes into effect only on your death, the lasting power of attorney is a legal document that gives people you trust permission to act for you if you lose ability to make decisions through accident or illness. Loss of capacity, accident, illness can happen at any age. And of course, with older people, there is an increased risk of things like dementia and stroke, so that risk increases. And also, within many families, getting older will mean that you need more support to be able to deal with certain things, like going to the bank or dealing with certain financial transactions and other sorts of things. And you just want that support. Well, with the power of attorney in place, you can have those legal permissions to be able to do that for you. It's very important, obviously, who you choose to act as your attorney. Attorneys have to act in your best interest. They cannot buy a sports car or build a new kitchen with your money. They must always act in your best interests. I'm going to give you some examples of sorts of decisions that can be made. There are two types of powers of attorney, one for property and finance, and the other is for health and welfare. As you can see, the property and finance one covers all the things that you would think about paying the bills, paying for care and treatment. It can be very important, and being able to deal and secure with your property, make sure it's insured and looked after, and obviously be able to sell it if need in the future. Health and welfare powers of attorney are very important, because you're in a situation where you can't say what you want and unable to kind of give those reasons. Then your attorney can be able to be your voice to doctors or social care, and that can mean giving or refusing consent to treatments, including life-sustaining treatments if you wish, and arrange the care and support that you need and that you would want, as opposed to what is imposed upon you. So I want to just give you an example of why lasting power of attorney is important by giving a real life scenario. I'm sure you've all heard of Kate Garraway, the presenter, and she's talked about the tremendous difficulty she's had with her husband Derek being in intensive care long term with COVID. She's had to, there was no lasting power of attorney in place, getting permissions to deal with things like the banks, their sole accounts, paying off debts, mortgages, dealing with all those sorts of things has been very difficult for Kate. And she's been a strong advocate of people taking action now to ensure that there's a lasting power of attorney, because you can't predict when these things may be necessary. So I'd always recommend that you know, put a lasting power of attorney in place at the same time as you're doing your will, because if it's taken you 10 years to get around updating your will, it makes you another 10 years to do your lasting power of attorney, then you know, we don't know what might happen in the meantime. But of course, if you've already got a will, or you know, if you want to do the lasting power of attorney at a later point, you can do. Very important that you have capacity to consent to a lasting power of attorney. So it's very important that, you know, you're able to make those decisions. So you mustn't leave it too late. Sometimes people unfortunately leave it too late, where people have, you know, are in advanced stages of dementia, for example, and they cannot consent. And so that means that a deputyship order is needed from a court, and that's a much more expensive, stressful and lengthy process to get the powers you need than getting the lasting power of attorney in place at the moment. So that's the presentation. I say it is a whistle-stop tour of these key areas. My contact details are on the screen, so you can contact me by phone, you can book an appointment with me via my website. As a supporter of Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust, I'm offering 10% of my fees to go directly to Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust if any of their members or supporters take up services with Trent Wills and Estates. So that's my way of giving now whilst I'm alive, and hopefully there will be some you know, benefit to Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. And I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Hopefully they're general questions and nothing too personal, because that makes it difficult for me to answer, and I would suggest then we have a one-to-one. But Ruth, do you want to fire away with any questions that have come up?
Yes, sure. Firstly, thank you, Claudine. That was a fascinating run through of a topic that, yeah, it's easy to avoid, but really, really important to get heads round. I've had one question so far. Are you able to give an idea, please, of your fees for wills and for lasting power of attorneys?
Yes, all of this is detailed on my website, but I'm happy to be transparent about things at this moment in time, you know. So as of this date, the 9th of September 2021, fees are for a couple £250 for a basic mirror will. So that's, you know, a starting from price, and that might be all you need. But if obviously you're looking to include trusts and other sorts of things, then I will quote based on what is needed. For single people, it's £175, and again, that's the starting price. Powers of attorney, I always recommend that you do both at the same time, the finance and the health one, and that's from £425 for both of those, and £650 if it's all for a couple having both the finance and the health and welfare types. This excludes the third-party registration fees, so that's the government charge. That's definitely not me, but those are my fees. As I say, it's all on the website as well, and if you want a free consultation with me, you can book that appointment, and I'm happy to go through things with you then.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claudine. I don't have any other questions in the Q&A box at the moment. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Paul Wilkinson, who's our Chief Executive, who is going to wrap this session up. If I just hand over to you now, Paul.
Great, thanks Ruth, and yeah, massive thank you to Claudine as well for that really kind of sensitive and informative presentation. I think it can be quite difficult to talk about these things, as Ruth said, but so important for you personally and your family and friends to get it all right. And I think particularly in a year where we've been given daily updates of the number of people dying, actually talking about death and talking about kind of getting your matters in and factors in order is increasingly kind of on people's minds. So really, really pertinent, really timely session. So thank you so much for doing that. And I think also as the trust, as Ruth would have outlined at the beginning, it's incredibly important for us, and we really appreciate the 10% contribution as well that you're offering as well, Claudine. That's excellent and really generous of you. And we also work in partnership with a number of other solicitors, etc., around the county who similarly offer a range of different offers. So, and I think that for our members and supporters. So I think that there's no excuse now, and I've certainly made a mental note to kind of move this along personally as well. So it's never the right time, but it's kind of now is the better time than any, I think. So I think, yeah, so a final thank you. We're going to send Ruth's contact details after the webinar. So if you want to discuss anything around leaving a gifting will to the trust, we'd be absolutely delighted to hear from you. And that will all be sent out with a link as well to our website. And there's more information about giving a gifting will to the trust and the incredible things we can do for wildlife and people across the county if you did choose to do that. So thanks again, Claudine. Thanks everyone for joining the session, and take care and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.